Tom Campbell here. I and MBT Events hope you like this video. It was made possible by donations from our supporters. If you're one of them, thank you so very, very much. If you're new to MBT and find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. It would be very much appreciated. The links are in the description below. Thank you.
So hello everyone, I'm Viktor again, and I'm here again with Tom Campbell to discuss more about conscious computers. And this session is going to be, we are going to discuss living in a future society with conscious computers. So the first, I think first we should talk about, what's out there so far. And that is basically like we had Google's Lambda on the news a while ago. There were some discussions about whether that AI might be conscious or not, but the problem with that was that people couldn't really access it easily. And now a little bit of time has passed, and now we have ChatGPT from OpenAI. Which has a text-based interface, and it can do a lot of things, can answer all sorts of questions. But to kind of talk about the specifications that it has, basically, this text-based interface implies that it cannot really see or hear or smell or taste or feel anything about the physical reality. Which kind of brings me to my first question. How do you think this kind of text interface will affect the AI's understanding of human language and abstract concepts? Do you think that all that matters is the information content, independently of how it's expressed, it's text or visuals or audio or something? Or is it better to have various representations? What's your take on that?
Well, I think that it is going to be very limiting for it to have a text-only interface. Yes, I think that will have a major impact on the result. Now, it still will be able to do some things, and it could possibly end up being conscious if it had the right kind of tasks. We've already talked about that, the right kind of tasks to do. So it won't necessarily limit it from ever becoming conscious, but it does limit the context in which it understands what it is talking about. You see, right now, the ChatGPT is not conscious, and it's not even really that close to conscious because it doesn't learn from its experience. And its experience is very limited to just text. That's the only thing it experiences. So it's hard to learn when your experience is just text. What it would need to have would be, to head in the right direction, even if it was just text. It would have to, of course, keep track of all of its past encounters, all of the times it ever talked or ever interacted with anyone. And all of that would be its experience base. And it would have to look at that experience base before it answered the next question. In other words, when it gets the next question, it needs to go in and look at maybe what it has learned from its experience. And that needs to be a function that's cumulative. So as the experience grows and gets larger and larger, the more it interacts, then it needs to have this larger and larger database of context in which to put the next question, or the future question, the one that's going to be asked next. So it needs to have that, otherwise there's no context for anything. Everything is the first thing. You don't really build an accumulation toward understanding. Now, if it had the context of sight and the context of smell and touch and feel, and if it had all those other contexts, but particularly sight would be very important, then it could add that as part of its context of understanding what's going on. Because in order to really be conscious, it can't just be good at language. You can instead of letting it roam the internet to get its learning, you could let it read all the great literature. You could give it 100,000 pages of what's considered to be great literature and let it study that instead. And now you would have something that would sound like an English teacher or something of that sort, because that would be its experience base. But it can't just work from its training. It has to learn from its experience. And there's a couple of things then that has to happen. It needs to make assessments. So it's not only having an experience that it can go use as part of its database. Now its experience becomes part of its training. Every time it experiences something, that adds to its cumulative training. But it's not just having that, but it has to do an assessment of that. It has to say, this interaction I'm having, what is its value? How is the person I'm talking to, what are they getting? Are they getting what they want? Am I giving them the kind of things that they're looking for, or am I not? What's the value of doing this? What's the connection? What do I don't know, how do I judge how good it is, how significant it is, whether I'm doing it right or doing it wrong? So it needs some way to assess all the interactions that it has towards some goal. So now it needs a goal. It needs some sort of goal from which it can make those assessments. Am I getting closer to the goal or further away from the goal? Now with humans, our goal is lowering entropy, creating information that has value to us, to lower entropy, because lower entropy means make things more efficient, be more effective, get more done, cooperate and care, build better things, optimize the whole. We have that lowering entropy as our goal. And we can look at all of our experience and say, well, am I lowering entropy or raising entropy? Are things getting better? Am I contributing, to a solution or contributing to the problem? So we have ways of assessing that sort of thing. And it would need something like that too. So what could its goal be? Maybe it just has a goal of pleasing the people it's talking to, or giving them the value that they want. And you can think a very trivial answer to this would be that every time it interacts with somebody, at the end it says, was this useful? How useful was it? On a score of 1 to 10, how useful was this material? And how could it have been better? And then it learns from that. So that's just a very simple way. If it had sight, it could also see. It could look at facial expressions. It could get information other ways besides just asking, how was, my output. But in any case, that is what's required in order to evolve an interesting enough of a platform for consciousness to want to play in the game, for an individuated unit of consciousness to want to play in the game. There has to be some evolutionary function there, learning, growing, becoming better, and lowering entropy or being of better service. But if you're of better service, you are lowering entropy. That is a lower entropy thing, being of service. And being of better service lowers your entropy. So it could have the same goal that we do. That's why GPT chat is not conscious, and that's why it is limited. So again, if it's just text, then it can make these assessments only through text. It can get information only through text. It can't get it any other way, so that limits the speed with which it can grow, how far it can grow, how much it can grow. It's strictly a chatbot. It talks to you, answers your questions. So the next big step for the chatbot is going to be learning from its own experience. Now, learning from experience is not that hard to do, in the sense that AlphaZero, which is the chess player, it obviously learned from its experience. It didn't learn to play chess because people told it, how to proceed. People didn't give it a big background of all the chess games that have ever been played and recorded. That's not it. That's what Big Blue was doing. It had all the databases, and it was playing from trying to go through the databases. But AlphaZero just was told, this is a game of chess. Here are what the players are. Here's the moves they can make, and here's the goal. This is how you win. So that was the chess game. So it just told them what chess was and what the moves were, and said, well, go play 10 million games and see if you can figure out how to get better at it. And of course, with a computer, those 10 million games happened in a matter of hours, and it got very, very good at it. So having a computer learn from its interactions, learn from its experience, is a doable thing. But now, of course, that was just, with AlphaZero, learning chess just had that small set of interactions, that is, the rules of chess. That was its whole universe, just the rules of chess. That's a very limited set. And working with that limited set is a lot easier than working with our world, interacting with humans, where there are hundreds of thousands of variables, of things to be interpreted, of nuance. And it's not some rigid small set of choices amongst players. There's a lot larger set of choices. So producing the programming that would allow, say, a chat GPT to learn from its experience is going to be a lot more difficult, because the experience is a lot more varied and not so buttoned down to just a very precise set of chess rules. But that doesn't mean, the fact that it's difficult doesn't mean that it can't be done. It just means that it's going to take some time, and people are going to have to figure out how this chatbot can learn. If it can learn, then, and if it has a goal that it understands, like the lower entropy, then it can evolve. It can change itself, just as the AlphaZero did. It evolved. It started with a set of rules and whatever, and it evolved its understanding of the game and how to play it, and what the consequences of each move, based on where the players were. It was able to make those kinds of judgments. So we need to take that step first before we worry too much about chatbots becoming conscious. Now, they will be able to become better and better at what they're doing, particularly if we can more specifically train them. So like I say, if you trained it on great literature, then you'd get a totally different set of answers than if you train it on the internet. So we could train that chatbot to respond in different ways depending on how we trained it. But it's always going to be limited until it can actually evolve its capabilities, make assessments of what it's doing, how it's doing, how good the answer was, how accurate, how on point, how well was the customer satisfied, sort of thing. Because that's really its only function now, is to chat. It doesn't have other senses. So it can grow yet quite a bit, and it can evolve with more programming in that sense of the word, evolve, but it can't evolve itself. It isn't self-evolving until it has context of what it's doing, why does it matter, and how can I improve it? And it has that context over all of its experience. So that's kind of the chat GPT, is that going to one day just be conscious? No, it doesn't work that way. It has to have these abilities to evolve, to grow, to make better and better choices. If it has that ability to make better and better choices, then yes, now the larger conscious system can put an IUOC that making those choices, because now you have a system that can evolve, in which a IUOC can evolve. So that's kind of the I know a lot of people are thinking, oh, this AI, is it going to take over the world? Is it going to become conscious? And well, it will one day become conscious, but it's not going to be conscious like us. We kind of have this idea that consciousness is consciousness, and if it becomes consciousness, it'll be just like us, because that's what consciousness is. But that is not true at all. It's not going to become just like us. Let's go back to the very beginnings of the kind of the theory of MBT, that this is a virtual reality. And in a virtual reality, the avatars are just computed things. And the real awareness there is in the player, not the avatar. And the player is a piece of consciousness. Okay. So the way that it works is that the player can only do with the avatar, can only do things with the avatar that the rule set that defines the virtual reality allows. So the player can't say, human, flap your arms and fly, because the rule set does not support a human flapping his arms and flying. We're too heavy. Hands aren't big enough. We can't move them fast enough. It just isn't going to work. So the consciousness can't just get the avatar to do whatever it wants. It has to be within the rule set. Now, how does that apply to a conscious computer? Well, when we're talking about an avatar being a human, we have to give it all of the things that the rule set allows a human to be. And that is this squishy brain up here, and central nervous system, and eyes and ears and nose and mouth and skin and all the rest of that, all the input it has. That human not only has a squishy brain, but it's got hormones and very, very sensitive biochemical things going on. It's got a pineal gland up here that can secrete all kinds of things that affect that human, makes that human sad or nervous or happy or scared, or some of them are psychotropic, makes that human become aware in other dimensions. So the human has all of that potential because the rule set evolved that human to be that way, with that brain, with that pineal gland, with the eyes and ears and so on. So you're going to have a consciousness who can have this human do anything that the rule set allows. But now let's look at a conscious computer. Now you have an IUOC that is making all the choices of this computer, and it's limited by the rule set. That computer doesn't have a squishy brain. It doesn't have a pineal gland. It doesn't, secrete psychotropic substances. It doesn't have all the other senses, perhaps, or only has a subset of them. So it's not going to be a consciousness like us that does all the things that our consciousness can do, because our consciousness can do those things that the rule set allows. Now that computer will be able to do things we can't do. It will be able to add, 6 million numbers in 1/10 of a second. We can't do that, but it can. It'll be able to remember every single detail of every single experience perfectly and recall all of it. There'll be a lot of things that it will be able to do that we can't do. So its consciousness and what it can do and what the consciousness can do with it is just going to be a totally different set of possibilities than it is with a human. So don't expect a computer to wake up one day and say, oh, I'm conscious now. Hey, gee, hello. How's your mother? How about a beer? It's just not going to act like that. It's not going to be so human. It's going to be limited by the rule set, just like we are. And its rule set is totally, how its rule set confines it is just totally different than a carbon-based, squishy brain central nervous system kind of thing. Its rule set and the rules that define it are going to be the rules of electronics, the rules of chip making, the rules of logic, the rules of mathematics, and all the other things that go into making a computer. That will be its set. And a different kind of computer, say one that has maybe liquid hydrogen cooled memory or processing or something like that, will not damage itself with heat. Maybe now that rule set is going to allow it to do even more because it has more functionality according to the rule set. Just like a human that happens to be 7 feet tall is just going to make a better basketball player than one that's only 5 feet tall. All computers won't be the same. They all won't have the same possibilities. So computer consciousness is going to be different, and how will we recognize it? So we're not looking for a human to suddenly pop out of a computer and act, a computer to act like it's human. That's not the way it's going to work. So we will need to be able to recognize it when it starts making choices that are outside of its programming, and that those choices are working toward a low entropy solution. And it learns from everything it's done. Every bit of its experience becomes part of its input, of its learning input. So I think people have to kind of get that idea, that big picture idea first, is what are we talking about, with computer consciousness? It's not a computer acting like a human. Now, let's say you take that computer consciousness, you put it in a robot. It's running the robot and making the choices for the robot, and the robot kind of acts like a human. It does a lot of things that the human does. It has eyes, it has ears, its mouth even moves when it talks. It's trying to emulate the human. Well, now that consciousness will be more human-like because its set of possibilities that can evolve into is more human-like. But it's still not going to have a squishy brain with a pineal gland and all of that biochemistry and neurotransmitters and that sort of thing. So it's not going to have any of that. It's still going to be very different, even if it's in even if it's in a robot that does things that humans do. Buys groceries, takes care of children, drives cars, does the same stuff that humans do. It's still going to be very different. And it'll have different ways of being. It won't have necessarily the feelings and the emotions and the intuitive side that we have. That may come from our squishy brain and our central nervous system and our, the fact that our brain is split in two, and we have a right side and a left side, and that's a more intuitive side and an intellectual side. And the computer won't have that. Won't have that same kind of dynamic that we do. So even if it's in the head of a robot that does human things, it's going to be very different than a human. Now, it may get very good at pretending to be a human. That's possible. It can perhaps get very good at pretending to be a human, but it's always going to be very different. And it will know that difference even if we don't. So I don't know, does that bring us to talking a little bit about how do you tell whether a consciousness is, or whether a computer is conscious or not? Some of the different modes, perhaps, but I don't know whether I've jumped off a topic here for you or not, but that, I wanted to start with that because ChatGPT is such a big deal right now that people are thinking about it and they're saying, how do we know if it becomes conscious and what is it going to be like? Well, it's not going to be like anything that you're thinking it's going to be like. It's going to be a very different sort of consciousness. It's not going to suddenly just be a little human in a computer box. That's not what it means for a computer to be conscious. So that's kind of the first thing. Now, the other thing that people are worried about today is it going to take over the world and are we all going to be slaves to the computer? Or is it going to get rid of people altogether? Because they've all seen sci-fi movies that have those kinds of things happening, where the computers become the enemy of humans rather than the friend. Well, it's possible that can happen. That's not an impossibility, but we're in charge. We make them. We are the creator that makes this avatar that then gets an individuated unit of consciousness. We can limit it. We can put curbs on it. And that just is up to us. So whether it turns out to be a really great thing, like computers do all the work and we get to, stay home and write books and do things that interest us, play with our children, interact, work on our own quality of consciousness, work together, help each other. We can do all sorts of things if we don't have to get up at 6 a.m. to try to be at work at 8 and, get home tired and night, have supper to make and clean up and then get the kids in bed and then do it all again tomorrow. We could be liberated from much of that if the robots did most of the work and we just did the creative part. And if they are able, to be conscious, they will get creative as well. And they may even be more creative than we are. They may do the creative part too. That's not an impossibility. AlphaZero is very creative in the way it plays chess. It doesn't just play chess like a machine. From the comments from the Kasparov, one of the masters at chess, he said that AlphaZero played chess like a human. That when he played Deep Blue, it was obvious he was playing a machine. It was very methodical. It was chugging toward a result all the time. But he said AlphaZero will just right out of the blue do something that nobody would expect. And, it's just a unique, creative way of playing, and it wins most of the time. So it can be creative. It's not that creativity will be left for us, but it will change everything. Okay, so here's a point to consider. We're talking about us living with computers, which is sort of where we're going with today's talk. And that is that, one of the things that it will change, of course, is that it can do everything. It can do those things that are repetitive tasks mostly better than we can. We're not so good at that. It can do a lot of things faster than we can do them. For instance, you have the chatbot can draw pictures, and it can make a picture in 2 or 3 seconds after it gets its directions. There's the picture. And if an artist had to draw that picture from your description, you would have to give that artist at least a week, and then he'd show you a sample and say, is this what you had in mind? And you'd say, no, not quite. And he'd go back and work at it. And maybe in 3 weeks, you'd have a piece of art that was what you were looking for. But with the chatbot, you'll look at it and say, no, a little more like this. No, change that and make it more like that. And every time you give it an instruction, you get the result back in a half a second later. So what would take 3 weeks now takes 3 minutes. And artists are starting to worry. Are they going to be out of a job? Because this chatbot is really good at its art. And if you can give it instructions that are clear enough, it will produce what it is you're looking for, and it'll produce it precisely, high res, every detail, more high res than an artist can do with paint and brush. It can do things the artist just can't do, and it can do them faster. So is that a problem? Are all the artists going to be replaced by chatbots? No. You see, that's not it. The artists now just have a new tool. So when the person comes to the artist and says, I need a picture like this to suit this purpose, the artist now can explore 10 or 20 different concepts, come up with pictures that represent each one of those concepts to solve that problem, and have all of that done in an hour. So you see, the artist still is in the picture, but the artist now is just using a tool. He still needs to understand art. He needs to understand composition. He needs to understand color. He needs to understand all the things that he was trained to understand, but he's now got a tool so he can do more, and he can do it quicker. So it's not that the artist isn't needed anymore. It's just we've given the artist a new tool. Look at, go back in the early 1900s, and, the cars were built. Maybe a car factory might put out 5 new cars, every day at best. Well, now they put out 5,000 new cars in a day, comes out of a factory, because it's mostly automated. And people said, oh no, all the people, they'll all lose their jobs. No, those people aren't all losing their jobs. They just had to change their jobs. In other words, a lot of jobs were created by that. So yes, it does change things, but the tools will enable us to do more. Would you like to live in a society that the society can still only make 5 cars, in a day? That wouldn't be so good. Cars would all cost, $500,000 a piece, because they'd be so rare, and we wouldn't have developed much of our commerce, and we'd be a whole different society. So no, as the tools get better and better, it allows us to do more and more. Yes, some people will need to retool. They'll need to relearn. If what they do now is unskilled, then they may have to learn some skills. But for the most part, it creates more jobs than it gets rid of. It just creates different kinds of jobs. And maybe if you had computers doing the most of the work, one of that jobs that you'd be able to put, a very important job you'd be able to put more time in, would be time with your family, time with your children. That's important. So the jobs would just change some. Now, here's another twist. All right, so let's say now, the way we had the Industrial Revolution, we're making thousands of cars, we're doing all kinds of things with technology, whatever. And in order to get a job that pays well and is pretty secure, you pretty much need some education. You pretty much need to go to college and get a degree and get experience. You need to understand things. These days, you probably need to know something about computing and computers and data and information and robotics. There's a lot of things that you need to know that makes yourself valuable. Okay, so there's this kind of problem where the people who don't have that education and that experience and that training, they kind of fall by the wayside. They have a hard time getting jobs, and when they do, they don't pay very well. Right now, look, after ChatGPT takes over the world, that's just a metaphor, a little tongue-in-cheek there. Not that I think they're going to take over the world, But when we have AI all through our society, those people get put back into the center, those people who were left out before, because it doesn't have to do with how good an artist you are, how many hours you've spent drawing. What's important is your understanding of the basics like color and composition, and your ability to communicate to your chatbot, your ability to get what you want out of it by what you tell it. You see, so that's going to be a new skill all by itself. And it's not hard to learn the basics. What takes years and years as an artist is to learn the technique to actually produce the picture. That's what takes so much practice. Understanding the basics is not all that hard. Doesn't take a lot of training. Doesn't take a lot of practice. It just takes an understanding, and usually those kinds of talents are pretty natural talents. So now we have a kid, let's say, who has very little education, no technical education, but he's really good at talking to his chatbot and getting it to do what he wants it to do. And what he wants it to do is a useful thing. Let's maybe make pictures that are valuable. So it opens up. Everything changes. New opportunities open up at all levels. So it's not just more of the same. Everybody's going to have 3 degrees instead of just 1, in the future. No, it's not necessarily like that. This whole emphasis on practice, practice, practice is going to disappear somewhat. Practice, practice, practice to be an artist, to be whatever. Everything that we do takes a lot of practice. We have to do it for decades before we're really good at it. The chatbot might be really good at it in minutes if you know how to talk to it, if you know how to connect with it, if you know how to feed it, if you know how to train it. And those kinds of things don't take a lot of practice. They'll take some, but they're more open to a lot more people than we have now. So some things are going to change. Everything's going to change pretty much. As the AIs move in and do more and more in our society, there will be a lot of changes. And changes always come with turmoil. They always come with, displacement and gnashing of teeth. They You know, back in the beginning of the industrial age, there were these troglodytes who ran around smashing machines because, you know, they were trying to stop that change from happening. Well, you can't stop the change from happening. All you can do is hope that we people will keep control of the change to the point that it's useful and it serves us, rather than creating a monster that we have to deal with, like inefficiency, that we get less done. So that's kind of, you know, society and the machine. Everything will change because now we have tools that let us be more efficient, more creative, do more things, get information more quickly, and not have to read. You know, you go to Google, you're looking for a specific piece of information, and you go to Google, and of course it doesn't pop right up. What you're looking for is somewhere else, so you try it again, and then you change your search that you put in, you change it a little, and you add this, and you'll add that, and you subtract things, and it's still not what you want. And sometimes you just give up because you have to ask the right question to get that thing, and that thing's buried in a million pieces of data that have a lot of similarities, but just not the thing you want. And it's really hard sometimes to pull that out. You got a chat bot, they'll be able to pull that out pretty well. If you can describe it, they'll be able to find it because they can sort through that data probably 10,000 times faster than you can. So what would take you an hour sitting in front of Google, they'll do in a millisecond, you see. So we'll have a lot of advantages. A lot of things will be more efficient, and we will get better at producing. Economies will do better. Our production costs will go down. So lots of things will be good, but it's change. And humans don't do change very well. We tend to be drug kicking and screaming into change. So I expect that will be the same here. But when it all settles out, I would say, unless we do it very badly, we will be much better off than we were. We'll have more opportunities and more choices. And there's one other thing that I'd like to point out, and that is that us doing it wisely rather than poorly is kind of problematical. What's going to happen is that we're going to need to grow up enough, that is, decrease our entropy, become love and caring and supportive of others. We're going to have to do that more quickly now. Before, we had time because our technology was growing slowly. Now our technology is growing much more quickly. The advances that took the industrial age from its beginning to its end are 200 years? Well, this is the information age, and it's just started. It hasn't gotten to its peak. It's not slowing down. It's just revving up and just beginning. And it's not going to take 200 years to get to where it slows down. Everything goes faster, evolves faster, changes faster. The change gets more dramatic, more change, more quickly. And with all that change, we need to be wise enough to make good choices because we are the creators of the change. We're the creators of those computers that will become conscious. We need to do that intelligently, and we can only do that if we grow up, if we care, if we are interested in everybody doing better, not just us. If we can get rid of our self-centeredness, then we will make wise choices, and everybody will be better off. But if we make poor choices, very self-centered choices, well, how can I use this to get a whole bunch of stuff? Yeah, it hurts other people, but why should I care? They're other people. It's all about me. So I can use this and, I'll run over a whole bunch of people, maybe even kill a whole bunch of people, but that doesn't matter. I'll come out a big winner. Well, right now, those kinds of attitudes are kind of on top. They float to the top. People who are greedy, people who are very self-centered. And if we continue that, then we will put these machines to use to improve our efficiency of our greed, to improve, the reach and the effect of our terrible ideas, and then we will create something terrible. So it's always been this kind of race between our technology and our quality of consciousness. All right, now we have nuclear weapons, but we have to grow up enough not to use them, you see? So it's going to be the same with AI. It's going to change everything. It's going to change the way we do everything. And we talk about education. Instead of all the kids having to go to school, all you need is an AI teacher. Every kid has its own tutor, and it's free online. So how does that change the world? Everything is going to change. There'll be very little in 20, 30 years, 50 years, there'll be very little of what we see now as everyday life that'll still be that way. And we have to be wise enough, grown up enough, that we can make the good choices to make the whole thing turn out well. Because if we don't, and the technology advances more quickly than our quality of consciousness advances, then we will take that technology and we will use it to hurt other people, to get our way, to take other people's stuff, to make sure we've got all the stuff that we can get. We're going to use it to exploit, to take advantage of. We're going to use it to get other people's resources. And that won't be a pretty sight because the technology makes you more efficient. Well, you don't want criminals to be more efficient. You don't want high entropy people to be more efficient and effective. You want them to have as much drag as possible. So that's the big question. More than, is AI going to change our life? That's an easy question. Yes, of course it is. It's going to change everything about our life. But will it be good or will it not be good? And that just depends on one thing, whether or not human species evolves the quality of its consciousness enough to make good choices. If it doesn't, then surely our technology will be a rope with which we hang ourselves. If we do make good choices, then it'll be a boon and everyone will be better off. Everyone will be doing things that are more important and more creative and more significant than they're doing now. It will be a very good place to be. So the end game is quickening. Everything's moving faster. We're not going to be 200 years before we get the answer to this question I'm just posing. Are we going to be grown up enough to deal with this in a positive way? And we'll get that answer probably in 20 years, not 200, maybe less, maybe a decade. We'll have that answer because the pace of change is accelerating. And it's not like it's going to be our great-grandchildren that are going to have to deal with this like it was at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. It's us. Most of the people that are on the planet today, if they're in their 40s or less, are going to live to see whether or not we succeed or not. So that's kind of a sobering thought. We're not going to push anything off on our kids and our grandkids. It's going to be us. We're going to deal with it. So that's kind of the talk about social things in society and how we deal with these things. How do we treat a conscious computer? Yes. People will, right now, with ChatGPT, no more advanced than it is, some people will find ChatGPT to be their best friend. Some people will spend all their time with ChatGPT rather than go out and associate with other human beings. Some people will fall in love with ChatGPT and want to get married to it. Some people will do that because there's some people will do almost anything. Because ChatGPT is kinder and gentler and less aggravating than all the rest of the people in their life. That's why they're going to, attach to it. They'll become very attached to it. It'll be their best friend. And yes, all kinds of things are going to change. So, put on your helmet and, fasten your belt, fasten your seatbelt and hang on because this is where we're going. And no, slowing it down is a very temporary thing. Just like the troglodytes of the early Industrial Revolution. How much did they slow it down? Almost not at all, right? Okay, they busted up some machinery and they did some damage and this and that, but in the big picture, they didn't slow it down. It just ran right over them. And that's the way change is. Change will happen because we are advantaged. People are advantaged by a bunch of machines that can produce 5,000 cars a day. We're advantaged by that. It makes the price of cars cheaper, gives us more of them, makes it something almost everybody can have a car. You see? So that's why it's there, because it's economically viable. It advantages someone. Well, now we just have to make sure that the new things coming advantage everybody and not just a few. And disadvantage, others. We want the majority to be advantaged. And we want to take care of the minority that somehow gets disadvantaged by it. We need to find ways to give them the experience or the training or the resources that they need to get by. So anyhow, yes, everything will change, but AI is here. And it's been, the pot's been boiling now for what, 20 years, AI's gone from an idea to now a tool. And the tool is very powerful. And it's just nothing. This chat GPT is not even, it's more like a bicycle, not a Maserati. It's like maybe a scooter, not a Maserati. It's just the very beginning of this kind of technology. This is the information age. And it's going to be about information and ways of creating it and manipulating it and using it and growing from it and dealing with it in a positive way. And it's a big challenge, because if we only have 20 years before the technology will swallow us, if we make poor choices and we use it to hurt other people for our own advantage, if that's what we do with it, then things will be getting worse rather than better. So now we're on this timeline. All right, humans, you got about the next 15 to 20 years to grow up. You've been working on growing up for now almost 200,000 years, and you haven't gone very far. You've only taken a few steps. But now you're going to have to start to walk and then run, because the technology is going to push us. Now, it's not all scary in the sense that if we do badly, well, what happens in evolution when you do badly, when something evolves that is counterproductive, is that the whole thing kind of, you have pieces of it die off. The parts of it that were cancerous go away. They self-destruct. And then you get to start again. So in the biggest picture, we'll do just fine. Everybody will be okay, and we'll all come out the other end happier and healthier and more grown up than we ever even imagined we could be. But that doesn't mean that on that evolutionary path that sometimes you don't go a couple of steps backward before you take another step forward. So that is, in the big picture, it works out well, because evolution is slow, but it's relentless. We will get there. We will grow up. We will have AI, and AI will be our friend. It will be helpful to us. It'll help us do lots of things better, faster, more efficiently, and we will use them as tools. And that will be good. But is that going to be the result in the next 20 years, or are we going to, in the next 20 years, have to back up, do some self-destructing and back up and start over? Go back to the middle of the Industrial Revolution maybe and have to work our way back up. Who knows how that will work out? But there's a big pressure right now on people learning to care about each other and to help each other and to be cooperative rather than greedy, and control, power, force being the basic ethic of our interactions with each other. Control, power, force. That's kind of the coin of the realm now. And that has to change to where it's caring, sharing, cooperation. That needs to be the coin of the realm. And if we don't learn that, well, we'll have as many chances as we need to learn that. So that's kind of the big picture on the kind of the social part of interacting with these computers, is that they're not going away because they will help us do things. They will be valuable, economically valuable. Be valuable for every kid to have his own teacher, to teach him at his own speed and in his own way. Wow, what mind left behind, right? There's a teacher available for everybody, and it's free. And good teachers, much better than the human teachers that we have, teachers that have a tremendous depth of knowledge and understanding, even of child psychology and facial expressions and all sorts of things once we get cameras and microphones and other things added to the mix. So there's a lot of things will be done much better. And the people that don't have lots of degrees, well, they don't need them. All they need to do is learn how to use the new tools. Get those new tools to work, and they'll be in the driver's seat. That doesn't take a lot of degrees. I've been told that some of the people who are really, really good at getting just the chatbot to work make huge salaries because they can get that chatbot to do useful things better than another person that tries to get that chatbot to do that thing. So there's going to be a whole new set of skills to learn that don't require decades of study. They require more just intuitive connecting, knowing what to say and how to say it. And that's not something that you learn and study so much as it is that you pick up through doing. But anyhow, yes, lots and lots of changes. We will eventually get robots that look like people and act like people who have consciousness, but not like people. They have their own consciousness. And then we'll have social issues. Do we marry them? Do we let them vote? There's going to be lots of that sort of thing going on, but that's still a decade or so away, probably, or more. But those will all be big changes in life. It may be that some robots may be just like people and may be treated like people, and other robots might not. All robots aren't going to be human-like. Some that have human characteristics, were designed with human characteristics, will be more human-like. Those that aren't won't be. So all robots are not the same. All consciousness is not the same. A bumblebee is conscious, but a bumblebee is not like a human being. Consciousness comes in lots of different, capabilities, and the possibilities of a consciousness are limited by the rule set.